Caesar. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. So today we will be talking about improvising versus planning and focusing on the game master's aspect of that. And by that we mean, planning your sessions or just rolling along as it goes, or something in between. And we've invited, Daniel and Martin, because you're both experienced game masters. And in my personal opinion, you have interesting, kind of similar, kind of different ways of game mastering. So it would be nice to hear your opinions on the matter. But before we start with that, I'd like to ask you, Daniel, to tell us a little bit about your role-playing and game mastering history.
All right, history.
Yeah, just short version.
Short. Yeah, I've been role-playing for like 30 years now.
30 years?
Yeah, I started when I was 6.
Jesus.
I got my first book from my cousins.
That's intense. We're 30 years.
That's sad, but...
Yeah. You've been role-playing for longer than Toby's been alive.
What?
You're not 30 yet, are you?
No.
No, exactly.
No. Okay.
And most of that time I've just been game mastering. It's been natural, and as most of you know, most people just want to play.
That's true. Less responsibility.
For some.
For some. Not for the game master, though. But
No.
yeah. So, what kind of games have you been playing?
Most everything, it seems, from both America and from Sweden. I mean, I'll test any system because anything has something great about it.
All right. Even Fatal?
I have no idea what that is.
Be happy.
And let's never talk about it again.
Let's never talk about it again.
No.
So, what's your favorite game?
Vampire, it seems. Vampire the Masquerade.
Good choice. Good choice.
Yes.
And you've run quite a few campaigns with that.
Yes, quite a few, even to you guys.
Yeah. What would you say would be your best memory with that game?
Well, it has to be the one where you two were gaming with me in a Victorian setting.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and the most memorable things is generally the ones that Martin makes. He was in a police station at one time. I don't remember why. But his sudden reaction was to break down crying, fall to his knees, grab a pen, shove it up his throat, through the throat, so he started bleeding out and screamed, "Help me." And we never really knew why, and we never found out what to do about it. It was just one of those great moments where the game just stopped.
Martin, why did you do it?
Well...
That was, 10 years ago? 15?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say I said 14 years ago.
14 years ago, yeah.
So I can't really say that I have a really clear memory as to why, but
you remember doing it?
Well, yes, I do. It was a kind of a desperate kind of character.
Ah, yes.
So he was an Irishman living in London in Victorian ages already. And
what was his name?
Joshua Starling.
Starling.
And he actually stole a fortune. And became a fast riser in the Victorian society.
I remember that, yeah.
And he had a lot of emotional problems, and I think this was just one of his outlets.
Just one.
I think I speak for all of us when I say the best characters have the most emotional problems.
And they're still around.
The deep-seated trauma.
Looking at you, Toby.
What? No. Don't include me in this discussion.
Stabbing pens into stuff. Rings any bells?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. What would you say would be your worst memory, Daniel?
Well, I can't pinpoint exactly the one, but I know the feeling of it, and it's any game session where you notice that all of the players and even game masters, we're just trying to make time pass. We have no clear idea what to do, no emotion, nothing's happening, nothing's clicking.
You're in a rut.
Yeah.
Yeah, those times always suck.
Yeah, and then it gets worse when either player or the game master does something that's just made to rile people up, and it goes really wrong.
Yeah, that sucks. We're talking about improvising and planning, and Martin, you've been game mastering Varangia, your setting.
Yeah.
And you've been doing that for almost 10 years, right?
Yeah, on and off.
Yeah.
And in the later years, mostly on. So.
Yeah. And how? I mean, we were talking before we started recording how long you've actually been game mastering this world, and we couldn't really decide because you did Chronopia before that.
Yeah, for a short while. So, because I started game mastering with the circle of friends that both Daniel and Christian belong to 16 years ago now. I think it was about the millennium shift there. So, and I would say that it was somewhere around 2006 that Varanga got its first appearance. So 10 years, I would say now.
And you've built up quite a roster of NPCs in that time, I would say.
Yeah, I have. I actually made like a month ago, I made a little inventory, and I actually made one full like binder, full stacked, and that was the most important NPCs.
How many pages would you say?
Well,
Roughly?
Yeah, roughly, well, 60 at least.
60.
And I think that was the most important ones. So they're all of them aren't, of course, I haven't written like a full backstory.
No,
or
but
anything,
each one has a page.
Yeah, sure.
And from my experience, you tend to play very loose with the actual story. You do a lot of improvising, right?
Yeah, for me, the planning is really focused on creating the initial parts of the setting and the meta plot, or the overall story arc.
Oh yeah, the red thread through the story.
Yeah, and also planning and creating some initial NPCs tailored for each and every player character. Yeah. After that, I kind of really do like the sense of life that comes to the playing while just improvising.
Yeah. Have you ever made a game, like a session, and be like, okay, I need some pre-made NPCs? Like, have you sat down before a session and done some of these? Or because I know that we make NPCs with you a lot of times. We sit down and we kind of discuss what kind of person this would be. But how was it in the beginning? Did you have like a roster of NPCs already made, or?
No. Usually, I actually I prefer to just start improvising, and then just as I go along, do the actual need for NPCs come up, and then I know now I need to get this. The thing I puts the most time into beforehand is to actually list usable names, because that's one of the hardest things for me, just to let it pop up out of my head, and you just get that his name's gonna be because as I generally thought in my mind just before the game, I usually I have a lot of loose images about NPCs and stories and everything that I could just pluck out and then just improvise from. But names, I do need
names
help with names.
All right, Daniel, do you have that same problem when you're making NPCs?
Names, you mean?
Names, yeah.
Always, but mostly the players that I create the world with, I mean, they create most of the NPCs themselves. I just generally I talk to the players and their contacts, allies, families, nemesis, whatever you have it. They'll actually sit down and give them names and personalities, because they're so into creating the characters, creating the world, and just moving along. So most of the times the names has never been really a problem. All the players also know when they play. Even when I'm a player, I know that names can be a problem. So whenever it comes up and we don't know a name, we'll just say that guy or just improvise something. It never matters. It never takes up time.
I'm gonna bring up an NPC I think both of you are familiar with. Knuckle Rico, I guess you'd call him in English. He started out as a player NPC, right? Who was it that made him? Was it the player or you, Daniel?
Actually, it was one of our players in a Valencia campaign in the Dark Ages. He had a prolonged time in a certain session, and instead of all the other players just sitting around waiting, they decided on their own just to pick up some names, and we are the guys that's following this guy around.
Yeah,
one of these guys was Martin, and he picked up this guy and named him Knog Rico, the most badass NPC that city's ever had, actually.
Yeah, his fist had 2 or 3 dozen reputation, right?
Yeah.
He could just hit anything and it would go down.
No one actually... not many people know how he looks, but most people recognize his knuckle marks.
Yeah. They're like the phantoms? marks, the little
Yeah.
ring mark.
Mm.
And you actually, Martin, what did you do with this NPC later on?
Well, firstly, I got to confess that I might have carried it a bit too far.
Maybe.
What do you mean?
Well, this NPC kind of ended up taking a bit more space than was initially thought to. So he just, he kind of.
And that was during Daniel's campaign, right?
Yeah. And I just, we just went with it. It was quite fun, and they actually just,
They hit it off, it seems.
Yeah, they hit it off. So as of then, I transcribed that NPC into two other campaigns in different settings, in different games. Most noticeably my Varangia campaign, my own created world. We actually took on a huge part in one campaign.
Yeah. I remember him being a very important NPC. And it's interesting because he really developed a very peculiar character. And I think between Valencia, your Vampire Dark Ages campaign, and when he showed up in Valeria, not Varangia, not Valeria. But Varangia, that must have been at least 10 years in between, right?
Oh, well, almost.
So he just stayed with us.
I can tell you this, I'm game mastering Valencia again, a reboot of it, and he is still there. I mean,
I love that.
Yeah, a good NPC, no matter who created it, it's too good to throw away. The same with player characters. I mean, I use them all the time as NPCs in other campaigns because they're so damn good.
They're very organic.
Yeah, I do the same. I have a limit to how different an NPC I can create. So I love, as Daniel was saying, reusing other player characters, both for the fun for the players themselves to actually
re-meet an old character of theirs.
Yeah, especially if they made a especially badass or really annoying character that we played with, and then just have them used against themselves.
You've used a lot of our characters, I know, in Varangia, for example. But I also remember when we played Eon, and you created an NPC. It was supposed to be the witch hunter.
Yeah.
But this is a little bit tricky to translate. But Martin, I don't remember how. Heckling, right?
Yeah.
And häckla in heckling is in Swedish is pretty similarly spelled to witch, which is häxa. So what happened there? And
it actually, because I made a prop to be used. I did a letter on like old paper that I had bought, and I had a calligraphy pen, and I wrote a letter. So it was from I think it was a cousin to one of the players. And it comes from a spelling mistake. So because I made a mistake and I had written so far out of this letter, so I was like, I'm not doing this from the beginning. So how can I just kind of save this?
So you wrote heck instead of hex.
So, and it was just he could be the heckling witch hunter then, which gives a very kind of fun, pun-oriented alliteration in Swedish.
Alliterations are fun, and it definitely made a memorable NPC. And he was really annoying.
Yeah.
You played him well. But I think whenever you create an NPC, right, a lot of people always think that I need someone to give the players something to do, and they work out of that. But I can tell, Daniel, that you don't agree with that kind of way of going at it.
Not entirely. I see an NPC as a tool for me to use to be able to provide the players and their characters with an opportunity to shine, to be cool, to do their thing. That's the entire reason. I mean, why should you have any kind of person in a game that hasn't anything to do with it? It's just useless time.
Good argument. And I mean, on one level, I agree with you, definitely. They're there to make the players shine. But I also think if you're making a big bad guy, for example, I've always found it interesting to look at the perspective of what does the bad guy want. If I can take a little example from my own campaign online, I had the players in my own setting, which was supposed to be in the ruins of a former dwarven civilization. Like the dwarves used to rule the world, and they got crushed, and now the game is taking place maybe 500 years after that. and the players were actually in one of the necropolis cities, which were like giant cities built underground just for the dead. So the dwarves built their own city. They put their deads in there, and they found a knife, a ghost possessing a knife, and the ghost wanted them to destroy a statue, which was basically keeping him stuck there. And he was a kind of sketchy kind of guy, but they decided to go with it anyway. And I put up plenty of clues that he wasn't really, a completely reliable character. And in the end, it turned out that destroying this thing would actually give him the power of this pillar, which was keeping the spirits there. So he became a lich. And I kind of relished because some of the players were really against helping him out, and some of the players were really for helping him out. And seeing this conflict in the party, and then some of the party members go, what did I fucking say?
Well, in this case, that's exactly what you do. I mean, you follow the players' guidance. They do whatever they want to do. You can never plan for it, not entirely.
Yeah, exactly.
You let them fuck up on their own.
And he was created with a purpose. He wanted to use them to get this power instead of,
Yeah. Well, that is a really important part when you're creating a nemesis or some kind of that. If you don't create a purpose behind him, no real humanity inside of him, I mean, it's just a cardboard cutout. You can have a stone pillar do the same thing. He can take so many swings of an axe, yeah, sure, but that guy has purpose too.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I also think that there's a good reason to just create NPCs just to create the sense of life in the setting. So I create certain people, certain non-player characters, just as a position to get the setting or the world around them to just come to life. They of course they do have a purpose, but mostly that purpose is not written and specified against or for the player characters. They're just there, and then it gives the players someone to either go for or against, and I usually don't know how the players are gonna just take that.
Yeah, in that case, what I mean is, of course, when I'm describing a world, there are people around it. I just never I don't put so much time and effort into people who might not get seen. But if the players walk up to an NPC that I have written nothing about, except, hey, it's the village smith, suddenly I'll have to come up with a name, a personality trait, stuff like that. If the players interact, they make that NPC so much more.
Yeah, and I really want to kind of put that out. And I think that's the whole improvisation. Kind of the center point for me is that the players, what they show interest in, and their ideas, it's what makes my game mastering great. Listening to that and responding to that, because in one of our long Eon campaigns, I did write a wizard living in the tower where they were living. In the beginning, he was basically mysterious. That was kind of all.
That was the one describing adjective.
Yeah. He
asshole.
He was mysterious, slightly not that nice, and he was from another country. I think that was all the three things I had. But as people were both showing interest in him, and also as we kind of went along in the campaign, I find that sometimes I find problems, or I find holes, or I find just opportunities where I could just take this already established NPC and it could just be this guy, because it makes
sense.
Honestly, it actually doesn't make sense, because in a large world you would probably meet a lot of new characters all the way, but in a way, if you play that way, always meeting new people, that's more realistic. But the players, they're already holding this entire fictional universe in their head, so it's actually a great strain for them to always get to meet new characters. So I feel, but in a way, to do it a bit less realistic by reusing NPCs and making kind of spinning all the threads together tighter, you allow the players to more easily interact and with the world. So this wizard that I wrote, he took on a life to become. So he, in later versions of this campaign, has been both a protagonist and the main the main enemy, and made like a huge impact. And
just from
that's Samhan.
starting out as
Yeah,
Aha.
that was Samhan.
wow, yeah. And just starting out being mysterious and
Yeah,
from a
he was
different
mysterious
country
from Talamur and living in the
bit
tower.
of a douche,
Yeah, and a bit of a douche, and then
Really?
he just grew.
Yeah, it's interesting that we've been mostly speaking about NPCs, but I mean, there's so much more to
You
game
mean
mastering.
situations?
Yeah, like I mean, what about objectives for players? for
All
example?
right. What I do, I can never really set an objective for a player because I know out of experience of you guys, by the way, that if I put out a plot line or red line, you will not follow it just out of habit. You'll break it and go 90 degrees to the left.
Do you think we do it on purpose?
Yeah.
Sounds fair.
All right.
You,
Yeah.
you tend to laugh about it quite a lot, so yeah. But that's great because that has forced me all the time I've known you to improvise, always. The only time I really have something planned ahead is I've learned it's special small scenes that I think at some point, sometime with some people, I want to do this scene for them or against them or something. This is one thing that's going to happen. So I have a bunch of these lying around, and suddenly you're just wobbling around the world, interacting with everything and doing really cool stuff. And suddenly I have an opportunity like, right, let's do this.
So you have
And-
like a cartridge, like a seed.
Yeah, I see more like, with bumper cars. I use them like bumper cars to bump you back towards the way I want you to go.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Yeah, at times I think we may have been a little bit obstinate in following your.
I have to say this. I have never had a boring time with you guys. Never. Even if I'm pissed, I mean, it just forces me to try harder.
That's an interesting perspective. I've been GMing a little bit, and I've had some trouble with trying to come up with new stuff. So, like you're saying, it's good if you're being challenged.
One thing you can always do, just look at the histories of the players and use that. Always. It works.
Yeah.
Usually I do, if I really do want people to go towards an objective that I thought up in my mind, I usually just set my mind that they're going to come to this objective. But if I do specify that objective too much, it's going to be a real hassle to get them there. So I make the objective kind of fussy. I decide it's more of a...
You're going to bring down this system.
No, I mean, it could be like... it could be like they're supposed to be rebels. They're supposed to do a defining act of open rebellion against the sitting lord.
Yeah.
But I don't decide from the beginning what that kind of act is. I don't decide what defining is. I want them to feel that they do a great contribution to the cause. And by just knowing what I want this objective to be felt and how they are supposed, I could just steer wherever they're running. I can just kind of slide the objective so it's still in front of them. So if they're running into some kind of like they're starting to interact with all of the bureaucrats, I could just say that after a while I could say that they're still in this bureaucrat thing. So I could just move the objective to say that it's going to be an act of maybe burning down the public library with all the records, as actually happened in one of my Varangia campaigns.
It had
which
very far-spreading
yeah,
consequences.
and that
to
was their great act of rebellion was to burn down an archive.
And we would have never seen that coming in the beginning of the campaign.
No, and neither would I have done. I wouldn't have thought of that either. So if I had decided that it was supposed to be a rebellion on the streets, even if it turned into that, I would have constantly I would have been frustrated that you weren't going the right way.
It's interesting. You mentioned the Victorian ages, I think.
I've done so.
And we were going to India.
Yeah.
And we decided to go across the African continent while the boat was going around it. And you just worked out of that, right?
Actually, I was so happy you decided that because the boat trip in itself was so freakishly boring. I mean, you're on a boat, you do some fishing, yeah, fun. Now what? 4 weeks later. No, the Africa thing was awesome. And you really played out the imperial part of the pure British gentleman that's never been outside of a park before. You
Crossing the African continent. How hard can it be?
Yeah. All the servants you could muster, all the ammunition and all the wine. I mean, you just strode out and each night every animal inside you could see was shot and you took a little piece of it to eat. At every campsite, you always choose one of the trees. I mean, it's a savanna. It's like 4 miles to a single tree. You always picked one spot with a tree, chopped it down, made a fire. of course, chopped down all the things around you, shot everything around you each and every night. It was like a trail of destruction you left behind. And it ended with a massacre. I mean.
Civilization, it's called.
Yes.
Yeah, a wall of bodies in the end, it's called.
Yeah, it was an interesting evening. That the culmination of the African campaign. I was going to say the Australian campaign, but I'm assuming the Australian campaign would have played out exactly the same.
Who knows? You weren't there. I mean, you didn't know maps.
No,
you knew nothing.
Yeah, that's true.
Without your servants, you would have been lost.
But don't you guys find it a little bit hard to keep track of if you're improvising a lot? Like, isn't it hard to keep track of all the information you're getting from players?
Oh yes.
How do you handle that?
I don't really, but mostly I try to keep small notes and thoughts in my head about what the core things the character is doing. I might forget 90% of all the things everyone says and does in the game, but the things I try to keep is the most important things. I mean, that's it. They can't really think that, hey, they're gonna remember everything I say and do. That's impossible.
I do recognize the same problem, but I do have a few ways to kind of parry that. At first, like in my own campaign world, Varangia, it's the campaign world is so huge that mostly it's the players having problem actually remember everything.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Then I do always look good. But aside from that,
We know now that you're bluffing, by the way.
No, but I do have a pretty good memory, thanks to something, for remembering these kind of details. And I try afterwards just to... I don't really keep a ledger or anything, but I do try to just think the game through, like in the evening or the day after, when and just kind of put down and jot down a few kind of like pointers, and we're going this or that way. And then we always, in my game groups, we always start every session with a quite thorough recap, which quite often reaches back more than one session backwards, and we also kind of add in a little piece of the setting, perhaps. And this really helps to refreshen and strengthen the memory of everyone involved.
And it shows what's important for the players, what they're focusing on.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's why I always use it. It's kind of my cheat note. My players are the cheat note.
When I GM'd in Varangia 2, which is a short campaign, I always tried to make a little list of events/objectives to get every player to have something to do, and then I just knocked them off as we did them during the game. And if that didn't happen, I'd just bring it over to the next one. That was my way of kind of keeping track and making sure that everyone had something to do. But I really struggle with note-taking, because you want to make a very realistic world, at least with the Varangia setting that I felt is so rich and so in many ways makes sense. It's realistic within its own confines, you know. But you end up making mistakes, and like everyone makes mistakes, right? You like, for example, the heckling witch hunter. But how do you work them into your campaign? Do you work them into your campaign?
Of course.
Do you just go, I messed up?
No, the simplest way is just to fake it until you break it. I mean, continue using it and try to make it work for you. Yeah. If at the end of the day you notice that, damn, this is not going to work, to be honest, just say, I screwed up, or you screwed up, most likely, because I never admit anything. And
you get screwed up.
Yeah. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
No, but make it work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most simple thing. I mean, if someone says, I got this doohickey that's really awesome. Yeah, they think they got it, but in reality, you are the game master who decides just how awesome it is, how much easily it breaks and stuff like that. I mean, it might need a nuclear battery for all they know.
Yeah, I think you should just try to stick with always just everything that's uttered or said in the actual game is canon.
Yeah.
It happened, but as Daniel said, it is at least perceived to have happened. So I always try to just go with the flow and just... Because almost anything can be... If you just think one, 2, or 3 times on it, you can kind of spin it in an interesting direction. Because in my opinion, nothing... No power or anything granted to the players or success or things destroyed doesn't have interesting and far-reaching consequences that will be very rewarding to play.
That is true. One thing I've noticed is when these things come up, just don't panic and don't set anything really in stone. I mean, if the players want a decision right now about this right thing, sure, give something to them, but most of the parts, whatever it is, it's not written in stone. You can change it just a little bit, nudge at the side afterwards, just like Martin said. Just keep it.
And in the essence of fairness, as game masters, we do this to the player all the time. We put them in really difficult spots, just forcing them to make snap decisions.
And live with the consequences.
So why shouldn't I just sometimes be just put in the same spot and just hovering over that abyss and just like...
And most of the times when you're playing with the players, I mean, they know that we're not perfect. They know that stuff like that happens, and they try not to be assholes about it.
We're almost out of time, or actually we're a little bit over time, but I wanted to end this with a question to you, Daniel. And as you probably noticed looking at the notes, the very last point that I wrote down is your old, what would you call it? Your old campaign, Weight of Ages, that you worked a lot on. And if you want to mention it, if you want to talk about it, it's fine. I just wanted to, do you feel like why didn't it ever kick off?
It was an object lesson to me. For those who don't know, which most, Weight of Ages was a vampire campaign setting that I just wanted to bring out. It's like a guided tour through the entire history of the World of Darkness, just picking up the players, embracing them at a really early stage, like several thousand years BC, and like making them living through each and every important instance of happenings. And the problem I had, I approached it from the wrong place. I didn't go with the basics. I didn't secure the fundamentals. I looked at the entire history like, I have to be perfect in every place. It has to be so many sessions. It has to be so many places. I even started researching what kind of cosmetics people were using, like Syria and stuff.
I mean, I that was probably the first time I wrote 7 pages of background story for my character.
Yeah, you players were awesome. You wrote so much things, and when I thought I might have a grip, I received a bundle of papers that clearly stated I do not know what the fuck I'm doing.
It was maybe it was just never meant to be, but it was.
It's done, by the way.
Oh, well, you said that 15 years ago.
Yeah, I started before the year 2000. Okay,
But I just want to make this announcement that I actually learned very much from Daniel's failure to get this campaign going, as I took that in mind, because I was really waiting for this campaign to start and it never kicked off, and we talked about this and why it came to be. So I actually very deeply incorporated into my own game style that I actually start playing and then answer questions as you go along. Because if you start the wheel spinning, it's so much easier. If you want to just plan everything from before you start, you're never going to get to the start.
That was the lesson I learned as well.
Yeah. And that's a really good point to end the episode on. I'd like to thank both of you for coming. Toby, you haven't been given much space to talk, but...
No, it's absolutely fine. Yeah. I haven't really storytelled much in my days. No,
and that's fine. I think we've all learned a lot about game mastering, and I'm really happy I could get both of you in the same room. You've both GM'd me, and I am, of course, the most important person in the room.
True.
Yeah.
Narcissistic bastard.
Anyway.
Diplomatic silence.
Yes, diplomatic silence is everyone's drinking water. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope to see you in the next episode. And you guys are welcome to come back too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Might happen.
Yeah. Oh, and don't forget, keep rolling.
Keep rolling.
Keep rolling.
Keep rolling.
Thank you for listening to Swede Rolls. Your support means the world to us. The music you heard playing at the start and the end of this episode is Fireside Tales by Darren Curtis. The intent of this podcast is to discuss themes and issues in all manner of gaming, but primarily focused on the RPG genre. If you have any comments or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Pay us a visit at swederolls.com, where you can also learn about the people doing this podcast and more. For our Let's Play channel, check us out at youtube.com/Swede_Fighters. And until next time, keep rolling.